Путіна і сказав: я готовий стати на коліна, тільки не ставте на коліна Україну. І ви можете побачити, і це правда. Це правда. Я зараз готовий стати на коліна перед кожною матір'ю, яка не дочекалася свого хлопця з фронту, свого сина. Я готовий зараз стану на коліна перед кожною дитиною, яка не дочекала свого батька. Я готовий зараз стати на коліна перед кожною жінкою, яка не дочекалась свого чоловіка.
What if I told you the story you were sold about Ukraine? The story of a brave comedian who accidentally became president, stood up to oligarchs, and led his country into a heroic war, was missing one small detail. What if the presidency itself was delivered? What if the war wasn't just a tragedy, but the final stage of a power struggle that began years earlier in TV studios, offshore accounts, and energy companies? In part 1, which I released for members only, we covered the rise of Ihor Kolomoyskyi, Ukraine's most notorious oligarch, a man so powerful he didn't just buy politicians, he built systems that produced them. Today in part 2, we finish the story. This is how Volodymyr Zelensky was made president, how Ukraine became a pocket state,
Development linked to an ongoing corruption investigation. Agents from Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau NAB
and how the system that pretended to fight corruption ended up feeding on war itself. In April 2019, Ukraine elected a president who had never held office before, never run a ministry, never led anything larger than a television production. Volodymyr Zelensky won in a landslide. To millions of Ukrainians, it felt like a miracle.
Объявление результатов экзит-полов осталось всего 2-3.
A corrupt system rejected, an outsider chosen, a comedian who promised peace. But here's the detail that gets skipped. Zelensky didn't just play a president on television. He played one on Kolomoyskyi's channel. The hit show Servant of the People, where Zelensky portrayed an ordinary teacher who accidentally becomes president and cleans up corruption. It aired on 1&1, the flagship network owned by Ihor Kolomoyskyi. For years, night after night, the line between fiction and reality dissolved. By the time Zelensky announced his candidacy, the electorate already knew him, not as a politician, but as the idea of a savior. Ukrainian sociologist Irina Bereshkina put it perfectly. Zelensky was a screen onto which everyone projected their fantasies. That was not an accident. That was strategy. Zelensky ran the most unusual campaign imaginable. No serious interviews, no policy papers, no debates, just vague promises, social media clips, and jokes.
Сегодняшний день проблема для Украины – это война. Сможешь ли ты ее закончить, если тебя изберут? И если да, то как?
А давай порассуждаем.
Да?
А какие есть пути? Вот сколько ты читаешь, видишь, а какие вообще есть формы? Минские соглашения не работают. Правильно? Правильно. Идти туда войной я вообще против, потому что я такой человек.
He promised peace in Donbass. He opposed rigid language laws. But beyond that, nothing concrete. And that was the brilliance. Because a vague candidate can be anything to anyone. Meanwhile, his opponent, President Petro Poroshenko, ran on nationalism. His slogan? Army, language, faith. A past-facing message against a fantasy future. And behind the scenes, Kolomoyskyi's channel overwhelmingly favored Zelensky. Officially, Zelensky denied any relationship. Unofficially, his campaign was managed by Andrei Bogdan, Kolomoyskyi's personal lawyer in the Privat Bank scandal. Bogdan would become Zelensky's first chief of staff. This wasn't influence. This was constellation. Then came the leaks, the Pandora Papers, documents showing that Zelensky and his production company, Vartal 95, had established offshore structures as early as 2012. Same year, they began producing content for Kolomoyskyi, British Virgin Islands, Belize, Cyprus, classic laundering jurisdictions. Kolomoyskyi's money flowed through them. Taxes disappeared. And through these offshore vehicles, associates of Zelensky acquired luxury real estate in London. At the same time, Zelensky made repeated trips to Geneva and Tel Aviv, the very cities where Kolomoyskyi was living in exile. 11 trips to Geneva, 2 to Tel Aviv. Coincidence? Poroshenko's ally Vladimir Ariev claimed 41 million from Privat Bank was funneled into Zelensky's companies. A standard Kolomoyskyi maneuver. Lend the money to yourself through layers of intermediaries. Zelensky denied everything. Kolomoyskyi did not. He joked, "Who needs a birthday when you just got a whole president?" Zelensky was inaugurated on May 20th of 2019. 3 days later, a coalition of NGOs released a document. 25 red lines not to be crossed.
Zelensky's first month in office, he was given a threat letter, effectively by the U.S. State Department, where they had something like 70 U.S.-funded NGOs who wrote a letter to Zelensky telling him, ordering him not to cross the below-listed red lines, or else there will be political instability in your country. Now,
this is in response for what happened.
It was a warning. If Zelensky crossed these lines, they promised political instability and deterioration of international relations. The donors behind this civil society, USAID, the US Embassy, NATO-linked organizations, the National Endowment for Democracy. In other words, Zelensky wasn't just managing oligarchs. He was boxed in by Western institutions that had their own red lines. And then Kolomoyskyi came home. Just 1 month after the election, Ihor Kolomoyskyi returned from exile. No handcuffs, no consequences. He immediately went on the offensive, trying to reclaim Privat Bank, reasserting control over Centronegro, strengthening his grip on Ukranafta. Police raids followed on Privat Bank offices, on the home of the former central bank governor who had nationalized it. The house was firebombed days later. Kolomoyskyi had threatened her before. Zelensky promised an investigation, but nothing happened. Then came the photograph, Kolomoyskyi sitting with Zelensky, the Prime Minister, and the Chief of Staff. An investment banker summed it up perfectly. This is your new daddy. In December 2019, Zelensky met Putin, Macron, and Merkel in Paris, the Normandy format. Peace was possible. A clause in the final document called for disengagement along the entire front line. Zelensky backed out at the last moment. The clause was removed. Russia saw it as bad faith. Later, Zelensky's own chief of staff admitted, "We tricked Putin." From that moment on, Moscow stopped believing peace was achievable. This detail is crucial because this was one of the final exits before the road to war became irreversible. Ukraine needed IMF money. The IMF had conditions: no return of Privat Bank, no compensation for Kolomoyskyi. Kolomoyskyi exploded. Screw the IMF, he said, suggested default, even proposed pivoting back to Russia. Zelensky performed a balancing act, appeared to fight Kolomoyskyi without actually hurting him. Reformers were fired, prosecutors removed, central bank independence quietly destroyed. The IMF paid anyway. The window dressing worked. In 2021, Zelensky declared war on oligarchs. He named names, paused an anti-oligarch law. But who decided who was an oligarch? Zelensky himself. His rivals were hit. Kolomoyskyi's sectors were spared. Power didn't disappear. It concentrated. In 2023, Kolomoyskyi was arrested, finally. But the system did not change. It simply switched operators. Enter Timur Mindich.
Kingdom, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Cyprus passports were also found, all issued in the name of Timur Mindich.
Once Kolomoyskyi's errand man, now Zelensky's shadow oligarch. He controlled energy, influenced defense, touched nothing officially. When anti-corruption agencies closed in, Zelensky tried to neuter them. When that failed, scandals exploded. Mindich was exposed. Ministers fell. Even Zelensky's chief of staff was raided. Same system. New boss. Ukraine was built on hatred of Russian corruption, yet it replicated it with Western sponsorship. Corruption was tolerated until it threatened the mission. And now the system is cracking. Zelensky is expendable. Kolomoyskyi, ironically, may be the one who brings it all down by exposing the machinery he helped build. If this were a film, this was where the credits roll, not with heroes, but with wreckage. Part 1 is available for members only. Part 3, if you want it, will deal directly with how war froze this system in place and why peace became impossible. Subscribe, because the story you're being told is not the real one, and it never was.